Okay, guys, sorry about that. I made a boo-boo. I made a boo-boo. These results are the early results. I told you guys these were the results, but this is my bad. This says early voting. The election day voting hasn't come in yet. So sorry about that. That was my bad. I got excited. I thought we were done, but we're not done. We've still got the election day voting. I should have caught that when I was reading the results. But those are the early results. So that's my fault. I was excited. I apologize. My helper here was telling me that I shouldn't have shut that down, so I made a mistake. But thanks for coming back and joining us again. If you jumped on our Facebook, you saw that we popped up. This is part 2. If you're wondering why it's part 2, it's because in part 1 we got these results, and I thought that was the end, but it's not the end. We're still going. So, like I said, if you guys have something that you'd like to talk about or something that you'd like to watch, pop it into the chat. Just ask for it, and we'll do it. And we were talking about Flop Flacco's issues, and I think we covered that a lot in the previous stream. And we're going to keep going until we get the election day results, because what we closed our stream with last time was just the early voting, and I will pop those up again if you guys haven't seen it. So here's the early voting. Not the election day, but early voting results. And they're very tight. So for those early results have Nelson Scott Harjo at 49%, William D. Lone at 50%, and Leonard Gouge at 49%, and Lucian Tiger at 50%. So again, apologies for that. Wasn't paying attention. Let's go back and see if we have any more results, the final results, the actual results. We do not. This is still the early voting results. Okay. Sorry, guys. I'm a little punchy tonight. What would you guys like to talk about, or what would you like to see? If you were with our previous stream, you saw that we covered the Tulsa DA. We covered Tloptlaco Tribal Town. We've covered amendment issues. We've covered the Freedman update. Let's see what else is going on. And if you're just tuning in, I do have here on the laptop the entire ceremony from last weekend, where the city of Tulsa gave the land for Council Oak Park and the Council Oak Tree back to the nation, which is really awesome and a great thing. We're still waiting on the final results for the election to come in. And then when we get those, we will do that. I'm going to switch this to exit full screen. Like I showed you guys earlier, we have, hold on. I have various videos we can play. I'm kind of tapped out on as far as topics to talk about. That's all of the stuff that I had previously prepared. So I know that everybody was saying they wanted to have more talking last time, but this time it looks like we're all out of stuff to talk about, as usual. If you guys want to watch something, let's see here. Let's take a look at, I'm going to play this permanent fund video. If you guys have a subject that you'd like to talk about or something, let me know. We're just waiting on results to come in. And when we get results in, final results, I'll let you know. Again, I apologize for shutting the stream down earlier because I just got confused. But that being said, let's check out what is the permanent fund.
Muskogee Media presents, What is the Permanent Fund? Almost all special appropriations, loan agreements, and legislation dealing with fiscal policy passed at the Muskogee Creek Nation reference the Permanent Fund. But what exactly is it, and how did it come to be? The history of the Permanent Fund begins on March 19, 1984, when the Muskogee Creek Nation entered into a 7-year management contract with Indian Country USA to manage the MCN bingo hall at the Mackey site. The Mackey site was the location of the Tulsa bingo operation and is now the site of the River Spirit Casino. This management agreement divided the net profits of the MCN bingo operation between the two entities, with the Muskogee Creek Nation receiving 60% and Indian Country USA 40%. The Mackey site is original fee land, which means that the land was never transferred back to the Bureau of Indian Affairs for allotment during the allotment process, and has remained property of the Muskogee Creek Nation since it was transferred to the tribe by the President of the United States in 1854. The 10th Circuit Court ruled in the landmark case Indian Country USA versus Oklahoma Tax Commission that this fee land was not subject to state taxes. In 1988, the United States Congress passed the National Indian Gaming Regulatory Act. On July 10, 1989, the Muskogee Creek Nation filed a petition in tribal court to remove Indian Country USA from the Mackey site for allegedly violating its contract with the nation. As part of the lawsuit proceedings, an order to establish an escrow account holding 40% of the net profits of the bingo operation since the start of the suit was issued in order to ensure that in the event that Indian Country USA was not found in violation, their contractual percentage of the profits would be available. While the case was in MCN District Court, the Muskogee Creek Nation National Council passed NCA 89135, which established a permanent fund to receive 40% of the net profits of MCN-owned and managed gaming operations. The legislation stated that during any disputes or litigation with any contract management firm, no funds would be placed in the permanent fund until settlement of the dispute. The hearing resulted in MCN District Court Judge Patrick Moore ruling that Indian Country USA had violated its contract with the nation, and as a result of the ruling, the MCN assumed the daily operations of the 1,200-seat Tulsa bingo facility. On June 30, 1994, the National Council, by unanimous vote, approved NCA 94-57, which authorized the principal chief to approve and sign a settlement agreement with Indian Country USA. This legislation opened the door for the transfer of funds from the escrow account to the MCN Permanent Fund. At this point, the escrow account was terminated, with a holding of over $7 million, which was moved into the Creek Nation Permanent Fund. The Muskogee Creek Nation Permanent Fund is codified in MCN Code Annotated Title 37-2-203, published on the MCN website www.creeksupremecourt.com.
All right, guys, that was our little video about the permanent fund. If you've ever heard of anything getting funded at the tribe, legislation or departments or anything, like a lot of times the interest on loans comes out of the permanent fund. That's how it was established, and that's kind of how it works. Let's see what else is in here. If you guys are interested, how about let's check out Johnson O'Malley program. We'll see what the Johnson O'Malley program is all about. Let me see here.
Muskogee Media presents, What is the Johnson O'Malley Program? The Johnson O'Malley Program provides funding for Native American education and programs, such as the Muskogee Creek Nation Challenge Bowl. The JOM program was established by the Johnson O'Malley Act of 1934 as part of what is often called the Indian New Deal. Its passage marked a shift in federal government policies away from enforced assimilation of Native Americans and towards encouragement and perpetuation of tribes and their cultures and traditions. With the passage of this act, federal funding for Native American education could be directed to states, schools, and school districts who had populations of Native children in order to encourage Native Americans to attend public schools. This move was in response to the conclusions of the Merriam Report of 1928, which examined the Department of the Interior's implementation of the Dawes Act, officially titled The Problem of Indian Administration. This report found that education and care for Native American children in boarding schools was grossly inadequate and recommended a policy of integration of Native Americans into the public school system. Even though boarding schools continued to grow into the 1970s, the JOM program became one of the principal means of subsidizing Native American education in the United States. 1975 saw the passage of the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act. Title II of the Act amended the Johnson-O'Malley Act of 1934 to increase the participation of Native American parents in the decisions affecting the education of their children. Title II also required all contractors to have an education plan approved by the Secretary of the Interior and provide full reimbursement to school districts for the cost of educating out-of-state Native American children. December 31, 2018, the JOM Modernization Act was made law. This act updates the allocation process for federal funding under the program, requiring the Department of the Interior to annually update the count of Native American students eligible for JOM program funds. For more information on the JOM program, visit the National Johnson O'Malley Association at www.njoma.com or the Muskogee Creek Nation JOM program.
All right, guys, that was our little video about the JOM program, given the history of it. Again, if you're just tuning in, so we had our earlier live stream, and the early results came in, and I thought they were the final results, and so I shut down the stream like an idiot. But they were the early voting results, so now we're just streaming until we get the actual final results. But if you want to see those early results, they're on the election board's Facebook page. But let's take a look at them again if you're just tuning in and you haven't seen them yet. The early results are, and I got to do this like this in order to zoom in. Again, guys, these are the early voting results. You can see there, early voting. We're still waiting on absentee voting and election day voting. They haven't been posted yet. If you guys have a request on something, a topic you wanted me to talk about or look into, or you guys want to pop anything in the chat, go for it. If you have a video that you'd like me to put on, we can. In the previous stream, I had a long list of stuff to talk about, and we've kind of covered all of that stuff. I'm going to close out some of my tabs here. And if you want to just get the results, you don't want to tune into the stream, you can go to the MCN Election Board's Facebook page. There's a link in the description of this video. And all the links from the prior live stream are also in the description of this video, so you can check out that stuff too. Let's see here. What could we look at? Let's look at MuskogeeMedia.com and see if there are anything on the front page that we haven't talked about here. I don't see anything, but you guys can go to our website and check that out. So what do you guys want to do tonight? I'm going to pop up another video. If you have a topic you want to look into or discuss, let me know. And with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and play another video here. This is what is the 1866 treaty? Now keep in mind, guys, that this video was done before the McGirt decision had come down. And so, there's been there would be changes to the end, but it gives the history of how the 1866 treaty and that whole process of everything that happened. So with that being said, let's check it out.
Muskogee Media presents What is the 1866 Treaty? In April 1861, the Civil War broke out in the United States shortly after President Abraham Lincoln was inaugurated president. This resulted in the withdrawal of federal troops from Indian Territory, which later became modern-day Oklahoma. The 5 civilized tribes were, at this point, well established in the territory, and the withdrawal of these troops put them in a difficult position. Soon, Albert Pike, representing the Confederate government, showed up in the territory to secure agreements with the tribes. While other tribes, such as the Choctaw and Chickasaw, were united in support of the Confederacy, the Creek Nation was divided, with almost an equal number of troops on both sides of the war. April 9, 1865, General Robert E. Lee surrendered to General Ulysses S. Grant, effectively ending the Civil War. September 1865, the federal government and the 5 civilized tribes met to negotiate at the Fort Smith Council. Commissioner of Indian Affairs Dennis N. Cooley informed the tribes that because they had sided with the Confederacy, the tribes had forfeited their rights, annuities, and land claims under previous treaties. The federal government was going to ignore the fact that 3 of 5 tribes had been divided in support of the Confederacy. New agreements would have to be drafted and signed, and the federal government required certain provisions in each treaty. The treaties would grant amnesty for crimes committed against the United States during the war, but required that the tribes abolish slavery, incorporate freedmen into their citizenship, and give up part of their lands for other tribal settlement. August 11, 1866, the Creek Treaty was signed and proclaimed. The ramifications for these agreements would last for over 150 years. Before Europeans stepped foot on the North American continent, southeastern tribes had already established a long history of capturing enemy combatants in raids and utilizing them as slaves. These slaves were sometimes incorporated into the tribe through intermarriage and tribal ceremony. Generations of literal and later ceremonial combat between tribes and tribal towns led to an intricate web of intermarriages and adoptions that formed the basis of the importance of the Creek tribal town and clan affiliation that citizens continue to this day. Indeed, an argument could be made that this process eventually led to the formation of the Creek Confederacy and its required political and familial agreements and alliances. Up until the 1866 treaty, some freedmen, as well as Europeans and members of other tribes, had been incorporated into the Creek tribe through these traditional methods. It is important to recognize a distinction from this cultural practice and the economic model of slavery that was introduced to Native Americans by European contact, which emphasized the utilization of humans as property and part of a business model. With the signing and ratification of the 1866 treaty, freedmen became citizens in the Creek Nation, regardless if they had been assimilated into the tribe by traditional methods or not. It is this distinction between the methods of obtaining membership for freedmen that has resulted in the long and bitter fight to decide the citizenship of the Creek Nation. Even now, legal battles are fought over the application of the 1866 treaty with the Creeks in regard to citizenship as well as tribal jurisdiction. At the United States Supreme Court, the validity of the 1866 treaty is a key element of the Muskogee Creek Nation's argument for expansion of the tribal jurisdiction, even though the Muskogee Creek Nation Constitution does not allow for freedmen to be citizens of the tribe, a requirement stipulated in the treaty. Forged in the Civil War Reconstruction effort, the 1866 treaty continues to be a firebrand in relations between the 5 civilized tribes, freedmen, and the federal government.
All right, guys. Oh, hold on. It was trying to play something that I don't know what it is. What is it trying to play? So let's check and see if we've got any results. If you're just tuning in, what we're doing here is we are waiting for the election board to post the official results on the election board's Facebook page. We had a hiccup earlier that we accidentally shut the stream down, but we're back. And if you want to just go check and see if the results are in, you can go to the election board's Facebook page. There's a link in the description of this video to do that. But I'm going to go check it right now. Let me close this video, and we'll see if there are any results. Let's check it out. Nope, just early voting results, which we covered earlier in the stream. So let us go back and play another video. What do we got here? How about per capita payments? Let's watch a video about T.Y. Pearl saying turnout was terrible today. T.Y., how do you know turnout was terrible? You know, did you ask people at the polls? Because We just checked on there and I don't see any results, but any information you want to give us. And also, if you're a citizen, you voted, tell us about your experience in the chat. Was it good? Was it bad? What do you think of it? Don't tell us who you voted for. That's not good, but tell us how it went for you and what do you think. I'm going to go ahead and play per capita payments, and we will check that out while we're waiting. Again, if there's a topic that you guys want to discuss or look into, pop it in the chat and we'll do that. If there is a video you want me to play, pop it in there and we'll try to make it happen. But with that being said, let's learn about what are per capita payments and how do they work.
Muskogee Media presents, What are per capita payments? Much of the revenue utilized by the Muskogee Creek Nation government is from casino operations. Profits from the MCN casinos fund many programs and services provided to citizens, but it is also possible for the net profits from these operations to be distributed to MCN citizens directly. This is known as per capita distribution. How does per capita distribution work, and what are the requirements for a tribe to conduct such distributions? In 1988, the United States Congress passed the National Indian Gaming Regulatory Act. This act contains the regulations under which all Native American casinos operate and established the National Indian Gaming Commission. The United States Department of the Interior has issued regulations regarding per capita distributions of Native American casino profits. Per capita payments are defined by these regulations as, quote, the distribution of money or other thing of value to all members of the tribe or to identified groups of members, which is paid directly from the net revenues of any tribal gaming activity. This definition does not apply to payments that have been set aside by the tribe for special purposes or programs, such as payments made for social welfare, medical assistance, education, housing, or other similar, specifically identified needs, end quote. According to these regulations, Native American tribes are not required to make per capita distributions under the IGRA, and if they elect not to, the tribes can still use the profits to fund tribal government operations or programs, provide for the general welfare of the tribe and its members, promote economic development, and donate to charitable organizations or local government agencies. Department of the Interior regulations require that if a tribe does make per capita distributions, that tribe must submit a tribal revenue allocation plan to the Secretary of the Interior for approval. This allocation plan must include reserving adequate funding for tribal government, as well as tribal economic development, donations to charitable organizations and local government. In addition, the tribal revenue allocation plan must include information and criteria for accounting of disbursements, as well as dispute resolution and utilization or creation of a tribal court system. Per capita distributions can be made to only an identified group of members instead of all members of a tribe, but this must be justified and not violate federal or tribal law. For more information regarding these regulations or per capita distribution, contact the United States Department of the Interior Office of Indian Gaming at 202-219-4066 or visit the National Indian Gaming Commission at www.nigc.gov.
Hey guys, that was per capita payments. So if you had any questions about that, let's check and see where our results are, if we have any yet. Looks like we are still we have the early voting results still. So if you're just tuning in, this is the second stream tonight, because in the first stream, I got the early results came in and I thought those were the final results, so I shut the stream down, but they were just the early results. So that was me being a bonehead. So we're back again and we're still waiting on the final results to come in. T.Y. Pearl says, wouldn't it be something if going back to district voting, more votes were cast from outside the districts on these runoffs than from within them? That would be interesting. I would hope that we would get those statistics. You know, and TY, you said turnout was terrible today, and I don't want you to do this. I don't want you to give away what district you voted in, because you said, I was saying, how do you know it was terrible? And you said they show the vote count on the machine when you cast a ballot. So my question to you is are you referring to the district you voted in, right? Or have you seen some pictures of the other districts, you know, like the printout, you know, because that's one of the things we always try to get is, you know, if you have a link to some pictures, you know, pop it in the chat. We'll take a look at them of the printout things, you know, that show the results. But I would normally runoffs are lower turnout, you know, and really anytime it's not a chief election, it's a lower turnout. So, and we've got to get the numbers up across citizenship, just generally for voting. You know, more citizens need to vote that can vote. It's a very small percentage that votes. You know, while we're just hanging out, let's go to the citizenship the election board's website on the Creek Nation and see if what statistics we can see there, because it's been a minute since I've check that, and we could do that while we don't have anything else going on other than waiting. So we got the election board here. Let's see, I'll pop this up. They got the Title 19, which is the election code. We talked about that in the prior stream. The sample ballots, the dates and deadlines, official results for the general. They've got the meeting agenda. You know, let's take a look at this, because we were talking about this TY parole, these election board meetings. You can see here that this is just a list of stuff. So the election board has published this, but it just says when the meeting happened, and then it says what the was covered, but it doesn't say any votes or anything like that. So there you go. That's what they're going to give us on that. Yes, the district I voted on the machine. Yes. Don't tell us the district, though. That's what I was saying. Going back to what percentage of registered voters cast ballots in the last election? Let's keep looking. Candidate bios. This is something new for this year. This is, I thought was good. The election board normally, hold on, somebody's coming in. Absentee is in. Let's take a look at it. Hold on. I got the thing up here. Boop. Unofficial absentee. All right, cool. Let's open image in a new tab. Okay, this has the early voting and the absentee voting. Okay, so we've only got one thing left, and that's election day. And what is the results we have so far? Nelson Harjo is at 47%. William Lowe is at 52%. So Will's extended his lead a little bit there with the absentees coming in. Leonard Gouge is at 40%, and Lucian Tiger is at 59%. So Lucian has extended his lead there with the absentee voting coming in. All that's left is election day voting. Let's look at the numbers, though, because that's kind of like what we were talking about. So we've got 2,130 absentee votes, and we've got 320 early votes on Okmulgee District, and we got 321 early votes on the National Council CB Tulsa District. So that's basically 2,451 votes so far in the election without the election day votes. So not doing too bad, you know, kind of what we normally do in this situation. Let me go, and again, guys, these results are coming in to the election board's Facebook page. As they come in, we will let you know, and then we will pop them up on the screen. Oops, that's the thing I didn't want to do, was close that. Let me just go back to where we were. MCN, that. Because we were on the election board's page and we were just scrolling down to see what all we could look at and talk about. The last election, I think, where were we? No, we went past Title IX, sample ballots, runoff election dates, general election results. Did we look at these? We are asking about totals. So totals, so this is what they have. It looks like the total number of votes here would have been 3,750 so votes. Just doing that math off the top of my head here with taking the votes for the National Council referendum, the amendment. So that's where we are. Let's go back and keep scrolling down. What were you asking, TY Pro? You asked what percentage of registered voters cast ballots in the last election. Let's see what they've got on here. Voter locations, precincts. These are instructions. Qualifications to file for office, campaign finance report. Okay, let me make this a little bit smaller here. So this is what they've got. Registered voter totals for each MCN district. So we've got Okfuskee has 1,741. Creek has 2,194. So the total is 18,135 for the entire Creek Nation is the registered voters. TY Pro was asking what percentage of registered voters cast ballots in the last election. So if we take, let me get a calculator out here because I'm no math genius. If we take 18,135 and divide it by, what did we say? Where was the totals for the previous election? 2025 election results. Hold on a second. Let me add this stuff up, guys. And if you guys are just tuning in and wondering what's going on, we are just waiting on results to come in, and I'm trying to answer questions as best I can. So we got 18135 total voters, and then we had, I'm going to use, they don't give me a statistic for the whole thing, but I'm going to use these totals here for the amendment vote that happened. So we had 2538 plus 1216. 1 second, guys. Let me calculate. 2538 plus 1216. So last election were 3,754 votes. So let me think. We want to know the percentage that is of registered voters. So we need to multiply 3754 times 100 and divide by 18135. 20% on the nose. So there you go. And if I did that math wrong, you guys let me know. But all I did there was like the old percentage things. I took the X over 100 and 3,754 over 18,135 and, cross multiplied and divided. And I got 20%. So now that's not 20% of the citizens, guys. That's 20% of the registered voters. We've only got 18,135 registered voters. Let me check really quick to see if we've got any updated numbers before I go any further. Okay, no, not yet. Let's go to the citizenship boards part of their of the Creek Nation website and see how many citizens we have, right? If they have that, here we go. They got a thing that's spinning up. So you can see there, I don't even need to make that big. You can see there we've got 103,926 citizens. So let's see what the percentage of citizens are registered to vote. That's another thing that's not good, but it should be better. But let's calculate it. So I need 18135 times divided by 103,926 equals 17%. So if you're just tuning in, we just crunched the numbers. 17% of Muskogee Creek Nation citizens are registered to vote, and 20% of those registered voters voted in the previous general election. That's what we found out while we're waiting on results to come in. Anybody out there that has a math degree or is better at math than me, and you want to run those figures and correct me if I made a mistake, we got all those figures from the election board's website and the citizenship board's website. And please go in the chat and tell me if I'm wrong, because I do make mistakes. Speaking of mistakes, if you're wondering why tonight's election live stream is broken into two pieces, it's because in the first stream, the early results came in, the early voting results came in, and I interpreted those as the final results. So I shut the stream down, and then after I got done, I was told, no, those aren't the final results. Those are the early results. So we had to start another stream to get the rest of the election covered. So, guys, before we started streaming tonight, I calculated how many times we've done this, the election live stream. This is the 10th election live stream, if you're counting the primaries and the generals in every year. So, and you can go back on our channel and see all of that stuff. T.Y. Pearl asks, what do you think the recently approved legal representation for the election board is related to? Can we speculate and gossip? So what is T.Y. Pearl asking about there? Let's go to the council's website so we can look at the legislation, because if we're going to speculate and gossip about it, we should start off with the paperwork, because that's always a good thing to do. Jared, T.Y. Pearl says, Jared, Dewey defeat Truman. Derp. Yes. That was also a major boo-boo. That was done. My boo-boo didn't have to go through a printing press, though, so that's one of the things. Let's see here. What were we doing? Oh, the election board legislation. Let's see, I think that went through in October 25th's quarterly session. Let me pop this up, guys, and we can look at what we're talking about. So what we are talking about is, I think it went through here, the legal, or is that in a committee? Maybe that's still in a committee. Let me look really quick. I think that is in a committee still. Hold on. I think it was here, BFJ agenda. So there was some legislation that went through committee appropriating funds for legal representation for the election board. Is it listed? The planning session won't have it, though. Hold on. Let me keep clicking around here. I'll find it eventually. If you know, T.Y. Pearl, which committee that was that went through, pop it in the chat to speed this process up, because I'm going to have to hunt it up. I don't remember off the top of my head. Maybe it was the quarterly session. Let me check Hugh really quick. Oh, here it is. This is it. Okay. So, November 4th, Health, Education, and Welfare Committee. You can see here TR 25-108 do pass 3-0 tribal resolution in the Muskogee Creek Nation to authorizing the principal chief to execute a professional services agreement for legal services between the Muskogee Creek Nation Citizenship Board and Rod Weimer, PC Attorney at Law. That's what you were asking about, right? The Citizenship Board? No, you were asking about the election board, which is right below it. TR 25-109, Tribal Resolution of the Muskogee Creek Nation, authorizing the Principal Chief to execute a professional services agreement for legal services between the Muskogee Creek Nation Election Board and the law firm of Savage, O'Donnell, Affelt, and Weintraub. So let's click it and see what it says, and then we can chat about it. And if you want to speculate, we can. Tribal Resolution of the Muskogee Creek Nation authorizing Principal Chief to execute yada yada. Whereas Muskogee Creek Nation Election Board is seeking to secure legal services for the election board, including representation in election matters, and the election board has selected the services of the law firm Savage, O'Donnell, Affelt, Weintraub in order to receive legal services. The election board has provided a professional services agreement. Let's see here. Any other information that would shed light on this? No. So there is this one little part here that says, including representation. Can I highlight that? No, it won't let me. Including representation in election matters. So, if you're asking for my speculation, and this is speculation, but just because that says election matters, so anytime, if there is a challenge filed in the district court challenging the election, you know, we always talk about these are the unofficial results until the challenge period is over, right? Well, when somebody files a challenge, one of the things they can file a challenge for is, you know, like fraud or irregularities. They can file for a recount and so on and so forth. And that process actually goes into court, and where the judge will hear the case, and they will order, you know, evidence to be admitted to see if it can be a recount, to see if there were fraud or irregularities. And in those situations, the election board needs legal representation to have their side of the story told. And sometimes these challenges go all the way up to the Supreme Court. We saw that in the previous chief election. Lucian Tiger filed one. In fact, let's go take a look on the Supreme Court's website. While we're talking about this, we might as well do that. Let me check really quick, make sure we don't have any results. Thanks for tuning in tonight, everybody. And I'm sorry about the earlier snafu, but we're still rolling here. This is still unofficial absentee and early voting. So let's go Creek Supreme Court. So we're asking about why they would need legal representation. So let's go down here. We can see these are final opinions. Let me pop this up for you guys. Oops, sorry. I'm going to move this down a little bit. There we go. So this is the Supreme Court's website. These are final opinions, 2025. Let's go back in time. 2024, 2023. You know, we can see here, where is it? Here's some. So for instance, this. 2021, SC 2021-07. Combined appeal of Adam Jones III and Lanissa Melton for fraud or irregularities in the 2021 primary election, right? So we're going to click here. Hey, thanks, Abalove. I appreciate that. Just hollering at the chat there, guys. You can see that in this Supreme Court decision, right, you've got these guys here, and then so there was a whole case where they went through and listed the reasons for fraud or irregularities. Let's see what the court decided. This was not the one that I was talking about, though. I think this one was about the ballots going through the mail. So the conclusion, after review of record on appeal and consideration of arguments of the counsel, the court finds the appellants have not met their burden to show an election fraud or irregularity as required in Title 19. Okay, so they didn't meet the burden. All right, let me go back, because the one I was looking for was the one Lucian filed, because that one went all the way through. Here it is. Okay, let's take a look. So 2019, yeah, that's right. That was the chief election. Election recount petition of Lucian Tiger, order and opinion. All right, so this is the big one. I don't know if you guys remember this, and if you're new and you just started voting, you wouldn't, because you wouldn't have known it happened. But this happened in 2019. I'm going to skip the decision again. If you guys want to read it, it's on the Supreme Court's website. So these are the orders. It is ordered that September 21st primary election is hereby deemed null and void. So we had an election. Well, let me give you it in a nutshell because it won't make any sense. We had an election. Lucian filed a petition for fraud and irregularities and a petition for a recount, right? And then those things went up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, there was evidence admissed and oral arguments heard. And one of the things that the Supreme Court found out was that the election board didn't secure, I think it was the absentee ballots correctly, and they didn't use a tape that they were supposed to use, and so they couldn't. And then there was also a problem where they were supposed to have a log of who opened the box that contains the ballots, right? And when they opened it and when they closed it. So they couldn't show that the ballots hadn't been tampered with. Okay, so the Supreme Court said, well, that election's no good, and they threw it in the garbage, and they said we got to do it over again. So the order says here, September 21st, 2019 primary election hereby deemed null and void required. It is further ordered the election board shall schedule a new primary election for all offices. In the accordance, all funds paid for the petitioner, so on and so forth. And then it's further ordered the court has not found specific evidence of tampering, but that the election board's lack of control and preservation methods have created a reasonable opportunity for tampering, and as such, the court finds an independent investigation into specific tampering is not warranted. So they said, well, we don't see anything that looks like it got tampered with, but we couldn't say one way or another, and we're going to do the whole thing over again, so it don't matter, we're not going to do an investigation into whether there was tampering. And that's what happened. Okay. Is the vote count broken down by district anywhere? Let me think. Let's go. Where were we? That's the Facebook link. Was it here? Okay. Now I've gone back to the election board's page on the Creek Nation website, and we were scrolling down on there to see what information we could get. T.Y. Pearl's asking, is the vote count broken down by district anywhere? I think there is. We were looking at something similar to that. Let me keep scrolling down here. So here is registered. You want vote count, though. T.Y. Pearl, are you talking about the vote count for the general election or for this, right? So specify there, but I'm going to look and see if I can find some more election results from the general. Here's the 2025 general at the bottom of the page. Let me look and see what that talks about. That doesn't have this is no, it doesn't. This is broken into the districts, but just for the races. It's not going to be I think what you're asking for is you want to know the percentages of people who are registered in a district who voted for what, right? Is the vote count broken down by district anywhere? Are you asking, is it possible to get the number of district voters that voted for certain candidates? I'm kind of confused by that statement. But this is all the election board gives us from the previous one, is who the percentage votes for each district candidate, right? It doesn't give us any information about the citizens and what districts they're registered in and who they're voting for, right? So let's keep looking. Let me check their Facebook page to see if any results have come in. Final results. Again, guys, the unofficial absentee and the unofficial early voting results are in, and they are on the election board's Facebook page, so you can go check those out. We do not have the election day results yet. They're still counting those. I'm going to go back to the election board's page and see if there's anything else that we haven't actually talked about here. General instructions. General election results, runoff election deadlines. How many votes were cast from voters registered in each election district? So you want to know how many people are voting out of the registered voters for each district. So we know, I think they have the, do we have that? Do they tell us the information on how many voters are in each district? So to find that out, we would first need to know how many registered voters are in each district, right? That makes sense. We'd need to know how many voters are in whatever district. I know in previous years, we had they had that. Let me click some of these voter registration things and see if it's in any of these, like if it's buried in something else. I'm just going to look. No. This is an update form. Voting locations, precincts, no. Because I know in previous years they had said, I've seen that type of a graphic before where it said, this district has this many voters, right? We still wouldn't be able to find out which way they voted, but you're just asking if they voted. We still wouldn't be able to find out if they voted, right? Because the election board's only giving us the total numbers of, it's not broken down in the results by each district, which is a problem. See, we've got here that this is the total number of registered voters, and then it says each district how many registered voters they are, but it doesn't say, like for instance, I think what you're asking is how many of those registered voters in each district voted, which I don't see anything like that. So my instinct there is to say that we don't have that information. But, they have changed how they did elections. Guys, I was mentioning earlier, if you, well, let me show you. I can show you. Let me check really quick to see if any results are in, because we can go back in time on our YouTube channel. Nope, still just unofficial absentee and early voting results. Let me do something here really quick though, guys. Nope, not that video, this. There's a chess video. If you guys like chess, shout it out in the comments. There's been somebody made a comment on our channel. How can I do this? I want to go to here, and I want to go to here, and I want to go to elections, and I want to look at all of them, and I want to look at the live ones, and then I want to order them with the early one. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so what am I showing you here, guys? Let me pop it up first. I'm going to pause it. If an ad plays, it's not from me. I don't know why that's starting in the middle, but did we look at this last time? I don't know. So you guys can see here, this is our election coverage, how it used to be. We were running little snippets. We had some hosts. But the important thing that I was wanting to show you guys is, let me get to the last part, and we can maybe look at the results coming in. I'm gonna mute this so you don't have to hear whatever's happening there. 1 second. Okay, so let me pop this up. So what we're going to look at is, this is the MCN primary election live stream that we did in 2017 for the 2017 primary, when the election board used a different company to conduct the elections, and these results where the election board gave Muskogee Media a link where we could see the results coming in from the company that did the election, right? So let's see if what it looks like, what that looks like. So I'm going to make a full screen and we'll just play. So how that used to work was, this link would be on you go to it and it would just refresh. You see how it keeps going. There's the same, Lucian getting results. And now these aren't the results from tonight, guys. This is from 2017, as you can say up there. I'm just giving this an example. Is this the information we used to get? Is the percentage of votes is basically the same thing. It's not any more information than what we're getting now. So we were just having a discussion there, guys, about the breakdown of the information and how one of the things we don't know is the percentage of people, the percentage of registered voters broken down by each district that voted. So we don't know. We know how many registered voters are in Okmulgee, right? Let me go back and see, because we can see that, right? So we know that Okmulgee County has 4,361 registered voters, but we don't know how many of those registered voters voted. And that's one of the things information that would be interesting to know. You could say that, you could break down by each of these districts how many people are actually going out and voting. If we do look at the information we got almost 4,000 people in Tulsa district registered to vote. Okmulgee has 4,361 registered to vote. It's the biggest for registered voters, right? So those are when we go to district voting, right? How will voting statistics change? Well, for one, let's take Coweta County here, because there's only 925 registered voters there. So if you're a candidate running in Coweta District after the district-only voting takes effect, you only have to contend with 925 voters there. It's a smaller percentage of votes, less number of votes that you got to get to win the election. Whereas if you're a candidate that's running in Okmulgee District, you're going to have to run a bigger race because you've got 4,000 registered voters there, 4,361 as of the last election. Let me check and see if we got any new results. Nope, still unofficial absentee and early voting. So if you guys have anything else that you'd like to talk about, let me know, and we will pop it up. We just went through the election board's website and looked at everything we have there if you go back in time. If you tuned into the prior stream, we had a mistake and we had to start another stream, so this is part 2, but it's probably all for the best anyway, because we got more people tuning in now. And we were just discussing whether it has been a low turnout. We can look, what we should do? Let's do that. We can compare totals from the, how far back can we go? You know what? I've got the election results from the previous elections. Let's go back to 2021. 2021 had a chief election, right? So let me look at this here and see what the total number of votes on these races is. So what I'm doing here, guys, is we've got the early voting in, we've got the unofficial results for early voting, we've got the unofficial results for absentee voting, and I'm going to see if from this we can see. Okay, so Okmulgee. Let's take a look there. That's a good thing, because this is also a race that was run with Nelson Harjo. So why is there such a huge discrepancy between the absentee ballots cast in this runoff compared to in-person early voting, and how do these numbers compare with the same ratio cast in the last election? How many absentee ballots were cast in the contested election court case that had to be redone? Okay, let's try to do that. Let me look and see if there's any new results, and we will walk through that. There aren't any new results yet. So T.Y. Pearl's asking, I'm going to start with the bottom one, T.Y. So how many absentee ballots were cast in the contested election court case that had to be redone? So this video is from 2021. That's not the one we want, because 2019 was the race. I need to go back in time. There we go, 2019. And you can see, I don't know if you guys can see there, but there's a whole bunch of stuff here. Unofficial 2019 general election results. This is probably what we want to look at. And you want to know how many absentee ballots were cast. Let's take a look and see if we can find out. Boop. Okay, that's not looking good, because let me pop this up for you guys. So I would also say that in 2019, the Carter Foundation were observing the election for their Democracy Foundation or whatever. So there's a video on that on our channel about it. But let's take a look at the results we got from the unofficial primary election results. Let me see when this video was posted. December 16th. No, this isn't the one we want. Hold on a second. We want the ones from September. Sorry, guys. Let me go back in time a little bit further. Yeah, election, yada, yada, primary election, October. We want September. Here we go. This is it. Okay. Yeah, TY, you are going to make me stroke out, but we'll be all right. I've had stroke before. So let's see here. Yeah, so this isn't good. I'm going to pop these up. These are the results. What we're going to look at here is in 2019, the election was done. They had a do-over. This video is the 2019 unofficial results from the September election that got redone. Okay? Yes, and it was uploaded on September 23rd, so we know this one. This whole election got done over. But let's look at it anyway. You can see here, these are the results that come in. It just says David Hill, 25%. Steve Bruner, 20%, right? It doesn't say it doesn't have any breakdown of numbers, right? And these images I've taken them directly off of the results. Hey, let me see if the election board has those results. They should be in here. Hold on. We want no, they don't have all of them. So the election board doesn't have the election results that makes for the do-over. Sooner Science Nerd says, what is the results? What are the results? The results are, we don't have them yet. We were just looking at some statistics from prior elections, but the results that are in are the unofficial absentee and the unofficial early voting. Let me pop those up for you guys. There you can see. Sooner Science Nerd, if you're just tuning in, these are the results we have so far, but as you can see there, election day voting has not come in yet. We are at zeros on election day voting. We have early voting here, and we have absentee voting. And what we were just looking at is T.Y. Pearl had asked how many absentee ballots were cast in the contested election court case that had to be redone. And that happened in 2019, and I did a video on those results, and this is the information that we had. It just says votes. So we don't know. Let me see if I can Google it and see. I don't think that would be a long time. Maybe I could do it through Facebook. The problem is I'm not logged into Facebook because I don't have a Facebook account, and Facebook doesn't let me, go back in time all the way back there. I wonder if we had it no, it looks like the breakdown, that's as much as we get. That's as much as we're going to get on the 2019 election, which isn't surprising because the whole thing had to be redone. And then even after they redid it, though, They still didn't give us any more information than just the number of votes. Now, the day of, there could be something floating out there that is different, has more information, but I don't think so. And if you guys find it, let me know. TY Pro, don't tell them to ask AI because AI doesn't verify his information. Got about as much luck getting a buy-burst. Yeah, I think that is true, TY Pro. If you guys have any questions or you want to talk about anything else, let me know. That was kind of a dead end. I can't answer that bottom question. The next question, the earlier question you had, though, is why is there such a huge discrepancy between, and this is a question, guys, that TY's posted in the chat. If you guys have any questions, post them in the chat. We'll try to figure them out. But he's asking, why is there such a huge discrepancy between the absentee ballots cast in this runoff compared to in-person early voting, and how do these numbers compare with the same ratio cast in the last? And could you, TY Pro, with that question, by the last, do you mean the general election from this year, or are you talking about the election from 2023? So just clarify that, but I'm assuming you mean the general. So I think what you're asking is, let's first look at the discrepancy you're talking about. Are you saying that why is there only 150 or 320 early votes and the absentee votes are 2,130, right? Versus, where is that? To get the other results, I would need to go here. Let me check and see if there's any results coming in. Not yet. Let me go down, and this is, though, oh, dang it. Where could I get those without being on Facebook? Here? General? No, it's not going to break them down like that. Sorry, guys. I'm trying to find that breakdown. I know we did it on our thing. Let me just go to our YouTube channel again and look at the results as they came in on our previous live stream, because it's probably going to be faster than trying to hunt out the paperwork. Sorry, guys, I'm just hunting this down, and we want to go back in time a little bit further than that. This one, boop. And we want to skip to the end here. This. Okay, here we go. So, what this is the results from the general election that happened earlier this year. So if we look here, we see that the early voting was I don't know if you guys can see that. Let me pop this up. So we can see, can you guys see that? Let me make it full screen. So we can see in the general, for the early voting, we had 564. Let me write these down in case we need to do some math. Early voting is 564, but it varies by district. See, early voting for Muskogee was 551. Well, we're going to have to go by district if they're all different. Hold on a second. So let's start off with Okmulgee District. We only got 2 races. Sorry, I'm getting confused. Let's find Okmulgee District here. Creek District, Corita District, McIntosh, Muskogee. There's Tulsa. Okay. Sorry, just hunting those down. Tulsa district was, let me write these down. Tulsa was 565 early voting. Absentee was 2,015. And then election day was 1,156. Now let's compare that, because this is what we've been asked, to the results we have in so far for Tulsa district. And that is, let me see if I'm getting any notifications here. I've got a notification. What's this? Okay. That's already happened. All right. Sorry. So this is the results we have right now for today. And in Tulsa district, we have 321 early votes. So that number has gone down. We lost 243 votes. So 243 people didn't vote. Only 321 people came back. So in the Tulsa district race, only 321 people came back, whereas in the general, 565 people voted. All right, so let's look at the absentees for Tulsa district. So in the general, the absentees for Tulsa district was 2,015 votes, right? And then with this one is 2,130. Did it go up? Hold on, let me check that. Yeah, it went up. That's interesting. How did that work out? So the absentees, more people. Oh, wait, I was looking at Okmulgee. Sorry. No, that's right. 2,130. So Tulsa district gained, let's see. $115 votes. That's interesting. So let's keep looking here. Well, that's what we have right now. We don't have, again, guys, we're still waiting on the election day votes to come in. We have the unofficial absentee and early voting results. Let's look at Okmulgee though too. That's the other thing we were gonna do. Let me find Okmulgee on here. Is it here? Here it is, Okmulgee. Let me pop that up. Boop. So, here's the results for Okmulgee for the general election. Make some columns here. We had 562 early votes. There were 1,996 absentee votes, and election day votes we had 1,154. Okay, so if we go back to what we've got so far for Okmulgee district, right, we've got 320 early votes, so that number has also gone down, which is, how many votes do we lose there? We lost minus 320. We lost 242 votes there. So just like in that is interesting. So I don't know if you guys caught that, but in Tulsa district, between the general election and the runoff election, early votes went down 243 votes. And then in Okmulgee district, between the general election and the runoff election, early votes went down 242 votes. So it's almost the exact same amount, 1 vote difference there. This is the number of people that didn't vote in the other election. Let's see if the absentee ballots also went up, because that's what happened in the Tulsa district. Let's see if that happened in Okmulgee district, because Okmulgee's absentee number was 1,996. That is exactly the same. So no change there for the absentee votes. Again, guys, we are still waiting on the final results for the day of voting, I think. Yes, we only have the absentee and the early voting results. Let me look at the chat and see if there's any other questions in. How many more votes do you think will come in? So we were just crunching those numbers, and to be honest, there's not really a pattern. There's a pattern for the early votes. Less people early voted this time. 242 less people voted early, right? In Tulsa district, there were 115 more absentee ballots cast. And in Okmulgee district, it was exactly the same number of absentee ballots, 1,996, right? So election day totals for the general election that happened for Tulsa County were 1,156. And for Okmulgee County, they were 1,154. So at a minimum, it should be in that ballpark, you know. It shouldn't be. We shouldn't see like 50 election day votes, but we'll see. I don't really see a pattern to extrapolate there. Let's see here. Are at-large counted as absentee? Okay, so this is a question that gets asked a lot. How does absentee work? Absentee, you do not have to do absentee voting if you are at large, and you don't have to vote in person if you live on the reservation. What does that mean? That means, well, I can live in California and vote in person if I get on a plane and fly to Oklahoma, and some people do. They will come all the way back to Oklahoma and they will go to a polling place and vote. Very few people, I would imagine, but it does happen. Conversely, I know a whole bunch of people who live in Okmulgee, but they vote absentee. They don't want to go down to the polling place the day of. They want to get their ballot in the mail. They want to sit and they want to vote in their house and then mail it back, even though they live maybe 2 blocks from the complex. So saying are at-large counted as absentee? No. Anybody can vote absentee and anybody can vote in person the day of. The absentee is not like a designation to say, well, this person's absentee, so they have to be at large. No, there's a lot of people who are not at large and they vote absentee. Are at-large voters counted as absentee voters? No. So much for the districts choosing their reps. Yes. Let's see here. Okay. I think we've covered as much as breakdown as we could cover. How many more votes do you think will come in? How many Tulsa Town's asking how many voted in person in the last election, absentee versus in person. So in the last election, the general, that's what I was just saying. I think I covered that. It's for Tulsa County, the in-person votes were the in-person votes would be Tulsa Town. Are you asking me the early votes and the day of? Because the in-person votes would be the early votes where people went and voted early, and the day of, which would be for Tulsa. Let me add these two figures together really quickly. 565 plus 1156. For Tulsa County, the early votes or the in-person votes would have been 1,721. And then for Okmulgee County, the in-person votes in the general election would have been, just adding these together really quick, 1,716. And those are the people that either they went to the polling place early physically and voted, or they went on election day and voted. Okay, let me see here where we're at. We need a breakdown on district versus at large on absentee ballots. TY, how would you get that? There's no list of at-large citizens. You see what I'm saying? Like when you register to vote, it doesn't ask you if you're at large. There's no way for them to know. You sign up, you pick a district, and then you vote, right? Just do the numbers voting on the district question to show an overall total to answer Tulsa Town. You're talking about the amendment. Let's see here. Well, let me get this thing to work. Well, actually, I can get that off of the election board's page. What do you want? Tulsa Town asked how many voted in person in the last election. You want all of the in-person voters for all the districts? So that's not, we can't get it from there. They can tell by addresses. Yeah, I mean, they can, but the problem is going to be what their address they list on their voter registration isn't going to have any effect on what district they pick or whether they're absentee or not. You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand how the at-large segment, if you had that statistic, right, how it's gonna affect the statistics of voting. They still pick a district to vote in, and they still vote for all the reps. And even after we go to district voting, they're still going to pick a district, and they're still going to vote for their rep, whether they're at large or they're on the res or not. If that makes sense. I mean, maybe after we go to district voting, that statistic would be telling to say how many people actually live in the district that they're voting in. But I think, and I don't really have any statistics to back this up, but I imagine that the reason Okmulgee has so many registered voters in it is because a lot of people who are at large, who are just picking a district, are picking Okmulgee district. That's just my theory. It can still be differentiated. Yeah, but the only problem with it is going to be like, I don't know if the election board would ever do that because we only get so much statistics from them anyway. You were saying Tulsa Town said how many more votes do you think will come in? How many voted in person in the last election, absentee versus in person? T.Y. Prohl said that I can do the numbers voting on the district question to show an overall total. So let me go here and let me see if I can find that. I don't know. I got to go back here. Yes. Okay. So, and I hope this answers your question, Tulsa Town. I'm going to read you the general election results. This is the absentee voting results, the early voting results, and the election day voting results for the amendment referendum that we passed. So the absentee voting total cast votes was 2,026. The early voting was 547, and the election day voting was 1,160, right? And you were asking, let me make sure that I tried to answer that. How many voted in person in the last election? So we need to add the early voting here to the election day voting, which is 547 plus the 1160, which gives us 1,707 in-person voters versus 2,026 absentee voters, right? So that is a difference of, let me write this down. You guys are making me do math, and I don't like it. So 2026 minus 1702 equals 324 votes. So judging by the results that came in for the amendment referendum, there were 324 more absentee votes than there were in-person votes. If that's what you're asking. How many voted in person in the actual election, absentee versus in person? Okay, so I think we answered it. I think that's the answer, guys. I live in X district on the res, but I can't identify as a Y district voter. That's BS. I don't know. You might be able to do that. I mean, so, if this is an issue, right, your regular voter registration. If you have a property in Tulsa, for instance, you could register as a Tulsa voter in that county. You just have to show that you have some property there. You don't have to live there. You could live wherever and say, hey, my house is here. This is my primary residence or whatever, right? So you could fudge it, if you wanted to do that. I know people do that. They have multiple properties and they will say, well, I want to vote in this district. You can't vote in multiple districts, obviously. That's fraud. But you can, if you have some way to show that you live there, you could do it. But my question would be, once we go to district voting only, why would you want to live in one district and then vote in another district? Like your rep that you're voting for, like you're kind of blowing your vote because maybe the guy you don't want to get elected in the district you live in gets elected, and then you're froze out. That wouldn't be a good deal. And then the guy you do want to win in for Okmulgee district or whatever wins is not going to benefit you any because you don't live in Okmulgee district. If we can identify as any district we please, what the hell's the point of going back to district voting? Well, going back to district voting, I don't want to give my opinion on it because I have an opinion on it, and I got to stay neutral for everybody. But going back to district voting is basically, I think, what a lot of citizens that vote yes for that are thinking is that, why did we change it? It doesn't make sense. And that's why they voted for it. And it did pass, and so we're going to go back to it most likely. I think if we had another vote on it, even if we talked about the primary election issue and all that's in the language, but even if we vote on it again, it probably would get similar results, because what you don't see is a lot of anybody in the government or anywhere else putting the argument for not going back to district voting, right? So there's an argument that's floating around, and it makes sense for a lot of people to say, well, why did we change it? We should go back to district voting. That's how it was originally. And, it sounds logical to people to say we vote for the representative of our district. That makes sense to a lot of people, So it was never explained really to citizens why they wanted to change it or voted to change it. Citizens did vote to change it to go to at-large voting. So, I don't know if the case was ever made for it, if that makes sense. So now you got a situation where we all voted, and one side, the return to district voting has a simple explanation to say we're going back to the way things were and that they it should be, versus at-large voting, which a lot of people were saying, why do we have at-large voting, etc. And there's not a good argument there. There is a good argument if you know the history of the tribe, but I'm not going to get into that just because some of that would include my opinion, and I'm not going to make a statement on what I believe the direction any of these votes could show, because the law doesn't allow me to do that, and journalistic standards also, I'm just not going to give my opinion. But if we go back to district voting, there will be a lot of changes that are going to happen to the political dynamic at the nation. And we are going back to district voting. And we're going to see those changes, and we'll see what happens. Do you think somebody might be challenging the district voting amendment in the last election in court? And that is what the recent legislation is about. You're referring to the election board getting the lawyer, or is that the legislation you're talking about? Do I think somebody might challenge the district voting amendment? I would be very surprised. Who could challenge it, right? Like, would a citizen challenge it, and on what grounds? That's the first thing I would ask about that question, is to say, if somebody is going to file a court challenge on the district voting amendment, right, or any amendment, right, they're going to need, it's not like a regular election challenge where, like if you're going to file election challenge, you've got some options. You can file for a recount. You could file for fraud or irregularities. And the reason you file for, when you file for fraud or irregularities, like we looked at in that other case, right, the court is going to look at the situation, and they're going to say, they're going to make a determination whether they think there's been any fraud or anything like that, and whether you even had grounds to bring this particular claim, right? They're not going to do that for a recount, because any candidate has a window that they can file for a recount, because they have an interest in whether they won the election. That's how legally they do that, right? That makes sense. With constitutional amendments, that's the question, is what is the legal framework for somebody challenging a constitutional amendment vote, right? Like if you're a citizen and you want to file a case in court to say that the district voting amendment election needs to be done over, or it didn't happen, or the results are not right, or whatever, like what grounds would you have to file it? Like what would you be filing it for? You couldn't file it for a recount, probably, because the judge is going to say, well, there's nothing to recount here. Like you as an individual citizen weren't involved in getting elected or anything, so you don't have an interest in this. Maybe the AG could file something and say maybe there was fraud or irregularities, but it would just be hard. I would want to see the filing and see what the claim is, and if the court would take it up, right, at the district court level. And then, of course, it's got to go up all the food chain. T.Y. Pearl asks, do you think the legal representation for the election board is related to the freedmen? No, I don't think so. And the reason I say that is because the freedmen have filed their motion for contempt, the first one. And that filing, if you guys remember and you watched our Lawyered Up, was all about, actually, let me just go back and look. I'll show it to you guys. Let me close some of this. If we go back and look at their first motion for contempt, you can see here that part of the argument here was, hey, they're not going to get to vote, right? Let me pop it up. Citizenship Board, what I'm reading from is the Freedmen's first motion for contempt that they filed. Citizenship Board's inaction threatens to rob Mrs. Grayson and Mr. Kennedy of their first chance to let their voices be heard in this nation's democracy. Critical deadlines for this nation's upcoming elections are imminent, including the August 27th deadline for ordering an absentee ballot and the September 9th deadline for voter registration in advance of the September 20th election. So you can see right there, that's one of the foundations of that motion, is that they're not going to get to vote. And what did this is the Supreme Court, right? What did the Supreme Court do? They denied that motion. And what did they say about that particular issue? Let's go down and look. Let me pop it up for you guys. Now, what I'm reading now is the court denied that motion for contempt, and the court stated, this court understands the respondents' excitement to participate in official Muskogee exercises of citizenship, but it also understands that its decision represents a significant change in the appellant's policies and procedures, and that it may take a reasonable amount of time to establish appropriate changes to appellant's internal policies in order to fairly and lawfully process respondents' citizenship applications. Okay? So what they're saying there is, we understand, and that is unfortunate, but it's going to take time to change the code so that you guys can become citizens and vote, right? So and guys, if you're just tuning in, I'm trying to answer a question here. Do you think the legal representation for the election board is related to the freedmen? The freedmen would only be able to file a lawsuit against the election board after they become citizens, right? And they would have to show that the election board is involved in this court case or this process in some way. You know what I mean? Like they would have to say, hey, the election board didn't make us citizens or the election board didn't delay these deadlines or something until after we became citizens, which there's no framework in the code to do that. So to answer your question, T.Y. Pearl, no, I just don't see that. I don't understand how the freedmen could file anything. Now, that's not to say, like anybody, people can file whatever they want in court, and the election board would have to have a lawyer to do that. But I think it's more likely that the election board is setting up the framework or changing their lawyer or something, but they got to have a lawyer on that they can hire in case there is an election challenge, because the election board themselves don't represent themselves in court. You see what I'm saying? Like the election challenges happen in court, right? There's evidence that it is admissed, even if it's just something like a recount. But definitely if there's an allegation of fraud or irregularities, and the election board needs a lawyer. So that's what I think it's for, is it's probably because the elections are about to wrap up and they may be thinking there might be a challenge. Or even if they don't think there's going to be a challenge, it's a prudent move by the election board to make sure they have the best legal counsel they have, especially seeing as in previous years, the entire election has been done over, right? And there's been court cases filed on almost every election we've had. And there's probably going to be court cases filed on this election, but we'll wait and see. Okay, guys, let me see if we've got any new results here. And where are we? We are still looking at the unofficial absentee and early voting results, and I will pop those up real quick for you guys. We're still waiting on election day voting results to come in. It's 9 o'clock. At this point, do you guys have anything you want to talk about? We've kind of just been rolling along here in the chat, asking questions about numbers and figures. You guys are having fun making me do math, which I don't want to do math, so don't do that anymore. And I would like to see more statistics come out of the election board for sure. And from earlier, if you're tuning in late or you tuned in later, we're probably going to see maybe before January a special election called where we vote on some more constitutional amendments, barring chief vetoing stuff that was passed through a council. So keep your eyes open for that, and as soon as we find out about them, we will let you know and get all the word out. If you go to the election board's page, I saw something interesting here. Where was it? I'm trying to remember where I saw that. There was a schedule that I saw of events that was coming up that listed some election stuff. Runoff election dates and deadlines. Was it this? No. Just bear with me a second here, guys, because, was it this? No. It was in the election boards thing. Maybe they took it down. There was a calendar thing on here that had upcoming dates and things. And I wanted to try to talk about that, but it looks like either it was on a different page or it got taken down. Where did I see that? Let me check the chat. If the rules don't apply for freedmen to file lawsuits, why should they apply to citizens? What rules? T.Y. Prohl says, if the rules don't apply for freedmen to file lawsuits, why should they apply to citizens? You can go down, anybody can go down and file a lawsuit, like right now. It doesn't mean you're going to win. It doesn't even mean that the court's going to hear your lawsuit, but you can file it, you know. I would recommend that you get a lawyer and run it through a lawyer. It would be good, but you can file it yourself. They call that pro se. You can file that pro se and just fill out the paperwork and turn it in. So there's basically not any rules on filing a lawsuit. I'm just saying, like, legitimate, T.Y. Prohl was asking, if somebody could challenge the district voting amendment. And I was trying to think of a scenario that would be a legitimate challenge that the court would hear a case. And I can't see one. I don't see how there could be anything. You could make a claim that the amendment election was unconstitutional in some way. Maybe it didn't meet some constitutional requirement or something. Let's look at that. We're just goofing around anyway. Let me check and make sure I don't notice. They missed the window to contest the 1979 election. I don't know. I don't have any. This is part of the problem with the 1979 election is, where you can get actual data about it is, I don't know where it exists, Like the election board, let's see if we go if they got what they got for it. 1979 Constitution vote. Let's see what it says. So this is the information that they have on their thing about it. Ratification of the Constitution. I'm assuming that's what you're referring to. It says for it and against it. There's no district voting or any of that stuff. We don't have any idea. We do have a total of, let's see here. 1896 plus 1694 equals 3,590 people voted in this, And my question too would be, if we're looking at just these numbers and we're not talking about the freedmen issue, right? The people who voted no against the Constitution, why did they vote no, right? I know there was a large contingency of citizens at that time that wanted the Constitution of the nation, the structure of it, to reflect the Constitution that was passed after the 1866 treaty, which included the House of Kings and the House of Warriors. Is that why they voted no? But we don't really know why there was, because it's a pretty tight vote, 52% to 47%. Even now, here's a question for you, T.Y. Prohl. Right now, if we amend the Constitution, right, we've got to have 60%, I think it's over 65% or over 60% of the voters who vote to amend it, Like if we get 51%, the amendment don't happen, right? So why is that different here? Because this Constitution, this vote on the Constitution, under today's constitutional rules, wouldn't get ratified. It wouldn't have made the vote. I bet there is a technicality on the district voting question. What is the time between when it was passed by the council and it was put on the ballot? Was a special election supposed to be called? Well, let's look at the Supreme Court's website, because there's the answer to all of our questions will be in the Constitution, because the Constitution delineates the process to amend the Constitution. And if special election's in there, maybe you got a point. But if it isn't in there, then you don't have an argument. This is the stuff that you would have to say that the amendment didn't do for it to not count, right? Amendment of the Constitution, Article 9, Section 1. Let me pop it up for you guys. This Constitution shall be amended by passage of an amendment ordinance before the Muskogee Creek National Council, which shall require an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the full membership of the National Council for approval. So the first thing they did that. 2, a 2/3 affirmative vote of the eligible voters who vote in a special election called for said purpose by the principal chief pursuant to the rules and regulations that the Muskogee Creek National Council shall prescribe. So let's take that apart, okay? It mentions special election, but it also says pursuant to the rules and regulations that the Muskogee Creek National Council shall prescribe, okay? That's why there's that number 5 on all those amendment bills. You know, let's go look at this. Hold on just a second. Let me pull one of those up so we can see. Or actually, we'll pull up the we are looking for the where was that bill? That was like in 2024, I think. Hold on. I need to find the district voting bill. Let me look through these emergency sessions real quick, guys, to see if I can find it. And if you guys know where it is, those are too big. Emergency session, nope, that ain't it. Let's go regular session. What I'm looking for is the bill that was passed through the National Council for us to vote on the district voting. And I believe that happened, I think it might have been in November. Let me go back here. Regular session. Just give me a second, guys. Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I thought it was last year. Let me keep going back. Quarterly session? Because it was introduced and then it was put off and then it was introduced again. I just got to find the original. Here we go. Yes, this is it. Okay. Whoa. Oh, well, this is going to be a problem. So, this NCA 24-096 is a law of Muskogee Creek Nation to amend Article 6 and Article 4 and Article 6 of the Constitution to reestablish district voting. Now, the problem that we're going to have here, T.Y. Pearl, is this says adopted a substitute 15-0. And I can almost guarantee you that this, when I click through, is not going to be the substitute. So take that as a grain of salt. But I'm going to click through it just to show you what I'm talking about. Where that the Constitution says, remember, that special election called for said purposes, I'm going to highlight it, pursuant to the rules and regulations that the Muskogee Creek National Council shall prescribe. And they do that prescribing in the bill, and it's under Section 5, typically, is where they do that. I'm going to scroll down here and see. Hold on. This is the ballot form, you see, for Section 5. The National Council hereby requests the Principal Chief and Election Board to include the proposed constitutional amendment on the ballot for the 2025 primary election as required by the Constitution of Muskogee Creek Nation. So, let me just recap that. We were asking if you could challenge the amendment vote based on the fact that it wasn't a special election when the amendment was voted for. And the Constitution does say special election, but it says pursuant to the rules and regulations that the Muskogee Creek National Council shall prescribe. And so in every one of these amendment bills that comes through, there is always a section 5 that says the National Council is asking Chief to put this amendment on whatever, either a special election or in this other primary election or whatever. They are prescribing him when to have the election, right? So that would be something that probably the court would rule on if there was a challenge, and there might be a challenge to that, but if I was just guessing as a non-lawyer person, I would probably say that the court would say, well, the National Council is telling you when to do it. They told you when to do it. So just because it's not called a special election, the National Council did prescribe it to be done at this specific election. So it happens on a case-by-case basis. Yes, sometimes they say it's going to be a special election, and sometimes they try to bundle it in with some other election that's happening. So, and then if, let's say that this imaginary court case, let's say that the challenge to it won. Let's say that the Supreme Court ruled that any election that had an amendment on it, or any amendment that passed, and the election that it was passed in was not called a special election, is no good. Man, you're going to lose a bunch of amendments. The free press is going to go away. That amendment didn't happen during the special election. This, when they passed the amendment to go to at-large voting, that wasn't a special election. That was during another election. You know, like there are a bunch of amendments that have been passed that weren't done in the special election solely for that amendment. You see what I'm saying? It would be like a nuclear bomb going off of, like the number of councilmen that we have. I believe that amendment, when they changed the number of councilmen per district, I believe that amendment went through and it wasn't a special election. I need to go back and check that. But so the number of councilmen we have is wrong, and the number of the seats and all of that stuff. Have they prescribed a time frame to hold an election on term limits? They did. Well, hold on. Let me check really quick to see if there's any results, and we'll go down. We'll take a look at that. Still unofficial absentee and early voting. We do not have the election day voting, but you are asking about the term limits legislation. So let's go take a look at that. That should be easy to hunt up because it's just happened. I want 2025 and I want the quarterly session, and we want to look at the new term limits legislation that went through that October session. I believe it's down here. Let me bring it up and zoom it in. Yes, term limits, NCA 25-105. Let's take a look at it. And what TY Pearl's asking me is, do they prescribe a time frame? Let's see what Section 5 says. National Council hereby requests the principal chief to set a special election and include the proposed constitutional amendment on the ballot within 30 days of this legislation becoming law as required by the Constitution of the Muskogee Creek Nation. Okay. So when does the 30 days start rolling? Now you'll notice that in this legislation, they say special election. And in the other legislation, they told him to do it in the 2025 primary. Okay? So they gave him two different instructions. So that's an example right there. You're asking if it's different every time. They can tell him to do it whenever. They're prescribing when it's to be done. And they're saying it needs to be in a special election within 30 days of this legislation becoming law. And this legislation was passed by the council on October 25th, 2025. Okay. Now, if you are not familiar with the process of what happens for chief after that, let's go look at that, because this will give us the time frame. The 30 days isn't going to start from when the council passed the bill. Now chief will have some time to sign it, to veto it, or do nothing, and then it will become a law. Let's look at that time window. What is that? And I need to go to, where is this? Give me 1 second to remember where that is. Election, citizenship, no. This. Sorry, guys. I think it's here. That's the qualifications. Here we go. This is what I'm looking for. Okay. Let me pop this up for you guys. So what is this? I'm looking at the Constitution on the Supreme Court's website, Article 6, Legislative Branch. If we scroll down here to Section 6 of that article, every bill which shall have passed the Muskogee Creek National Council, which this bill did, before it becomes an ordinance, shall be presented to the principal chief of the Muskogee Creek Nation. If he approves, he shall sign it. So, first step, if this bill came out of council, went to chief's office, and he signed it, that's when the 30 days starts counting from then. If he didn't sign it, let's see what happens there. But if you guys don't know where I am, I'm right here. I'm going to highlight this stuff. But if he shall return it with his objections to the Muskogee Creek National Council, who shall enter the objections at large on their journal and proceed to reconsider it. If, after such reconsideration, 2/3 of the full membership of the Muskogee Creek National Council shall pass the bill, it shall become an ordinance. So let me jump in there. What does that talk about? Veto override. Okay? Now, I do want to point something out that didn't happen. We're talking about the term limit legislation, and as the previous stream when I went over this stuff, this is the second version that has gone through the council, because the first version that was passed in September, Chief vetoed it, but he did not enter his veto message, and we don't know what his veto message is. But you can see right there in the Constitution says, he shall return it with his objections. So he has to give his objections, and they shall enter the objections at large on their journal, which means you and I are able to read why Chief vetoed this. And you and I don't know why Chief vetoed the first version of this, because there hasn't been published anywhere. So that's a constitutional violation. In such cases, I'm going to go back to it. So that's the veto process. They're saying, and if that happens in real life, right? Just like we saw earlier with this particular amendment legislation that we're talking about. They pass the law, Chief vetoes it, and then the council has to wait till the next council meeting before they can veto override, because they got to have the whole council do it. Okay? So that's like a month. The 30 days isn't going to start till way after in that particular scenario. There's a third scenario. So we've covered Chief signs it. As soon as Chief signs it, the 30 days starts ticking. Chief vetoes it. 30 days don't start ticking until the council overrides his veto. Okay? The third scenario is Chief does nothing. Let's read what the Constitution says about that. In such cases, they're talking about the president. Oh, here we go. Let me highlight just what I'm talking about right now. If any bill shall not be returned by the principal chief within 10 days, Sundays and holidays excepted, after it shall have been presented to him, the same shall be an ordinance as if he had signed it. So what the Constitution says is, this bill passed on this date, and Chief doesn't do nothing, 10 days, not counting the Sundays, after that, it becomes an ordinance, and that 30 days starts ticking. Okay? So let's take a look when that was passed. Where did I do that? This one? Yes. So October 25th, let me look at a calendar here. Sorry, guys. I'll just do it down here on this one. I got the calendar right. Oh, no. Be quiet. Why is it doing that? Sorry, I don't know why my calendar wants to be like that. Here we go. So this past October 25th, that's just what? Which was Saturday, okay? So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So November 6th, Thursday of this week, if Chief hadn't signed this, then the 30 days is going to start ticking, right? Which means that he's got to should by law see an election, a special election pop up between now and December 6th. I'm just ballparking it because more than that, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, something like that. So this month, later this month, probably, right? Now, if Chief signed it, that day will move up a little bit because the 10 days wouldn't have gone by. And if he vetoed it, we should see at the next council session, which would be, when is their next council session? Hold on, let me adjust this. We should see that this got returned as a veto when they do their next session. They got planning session, and there's no veto listed on that. So we should see it pretty soon, 30 days. Try to answer that question. Let me see if there's anything that I missed here in the chat while we're waiting. Let me check and see if we got any new results. No. Unofficial absentee and early voting results is what we've already been covered. We don't have the election day results yet. It's 9:36. Where are we at? Have they prescribed time frame? Yes, we answered that. Freedom of communication are lied in their favor. This discretion seems to allow them arbitrary to decide which questions will appear higher turnout elections or lower turnout special elections, don't it? How much time passed between the district voting question passing the council and when it appeared on the ballot for a vote compared to this term limits special election vote? Well, TY, and those are questions I'm reading from the chat. You guys that are watching that can't see the chat or whatever, I'm just reading questions. TY Pro asks, how much time passed between the district voting question, the legislation passed the council, and when it appeared on the ballot, compared to the term limits special election vote that just happened, right? Well, and TY, I think, is pointing out here that the council sets those time frames because for the district voting question, the council could have said, we're directing Chief to have a special election within 30 days of us passing this legislation. For whatever reason, they didn't do that. And if I'm just guessing, I'm just going to guess why they didn't do that. I think it would look kind of fishy. If I was a councilman, I don't know if I would want to do that because you've got an election year coming up. Some people have already started campaigning, right? This is like November or of 24, and you're going to pass something. You're going to pass something where citizens are going to do a constitutional amendment vote, right before an election year. It's like when it is a good time to do it, but also, so voting on it, maybe that was the logic behind saying, okay, we're going to vote on it in next year's primary so that it doesn't influence that primary election's campaign, right? Because it would be a drastic, like since we're going back to district voting, you'll see a change in how people campaign, I think. But the amount of time that passed is like a year, almost a year to the day for the district voting, right? Or not a year, a little less than a year. Whereas the the term limits is 30 days. 30 days from when it passed if Chief signs it. Putting term limits on a low turnout election in the dead of winter stinks. Well, I mean, what's your logic there, T.Y. Pearl? Because it sounds like you're saying they're trying to cook it for turnout, but the Constitution says it's the percentage of voters who vote in the election, not the percentage of voters, right? Like, let's say 30 people show up to vote for this term limit thing. It's going to be the 2/3 percentage, the 66 percentage of the 30 people that voted, right? The percentage isn't going to change, is what I'm saying. So, yeah, you could say that maybe, how would you, if, I'm just trying to imagine a scenario where you were trying to do something devious, what would you do? So you would say, we're going to have this in December, and do I want there to be term limits or not term limits? So I'm a councilman and I don't want there to be term limits, right? I don't want it to pass. So I'm going to create a scenario where I can pack as many people as I can and get them to vote against this amendment in December, and I can get that done because at-large voters or whoever isn't going to be able to vote, right? Is that the scenario that you're proposing? Because I would also point out there's also another problem with this, which is absentee ballots. The election has to be conducted within 30 days of Chief signing this or when it becomes a law, right? And they got to get absentee ballots mailed out to all the citizens for this special election so they can vote on this amendment. And is the election board ready to do it? Now, the election board has been appropriated money to do this a special election. But if we go, let me check and see if we got any results real quick before I go any further, because I'm going on you got me going on time. Oh, here we go. We got results. Okay. We got results here, guys. Let me do my deal. Open image in a new tab. We got them. Here we go. And I want to remind you guys that these are the unofficial results. They will become official on November the 14th at 5 p.m. Nelson Harjo got 1,000, let me just jump to the chase. The total is 47.81% for Nelson, and William Lowe got 52.19%. So he has won his race. And then in Tulsa District, Lucian Gouge got 42%, and Leonard Gouge and Lucian Tiger got 57%, so he has won his race. So there we are. If you guys have any questions about the numbers, we had gone through and discussed that in length at an earlier time in the stream, and you can see those breakdowns. And again, these are unofficial results. They will become official on November the 14th at 5 p.m., barring any challenges. If there is a challenge filed, we will let you guys know. And if you guys want to look at those results yourself, they are on the election board's Facebook page. And that pretty much wraps us up for the evening. It's 9:43. We got done a little bit earlier from previous times. If you guys have a question, I don't see any questions other than me and TY were having a conversation there. But we will check you guys out later. And thanks for tuning in, and thanks for participating in this process and asking all the questions. And we will do this again probably, hopefully soon, on the constitutional amendment special election, if Chief didn't veto it or anything like that. And we'll be reporting on that. So, Mado guys, and we'll see you later. Mado hadum chihichat lees.